Okay, and we're live. Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Welcome to another live stream. We're going to talk about the BRICS currency today. There have been some interesting developments in regards to the possibility of this BRICS currency. I'm sure many of you are aware of this. We're going to sort through some of the information that we've gotten, some of the reports, because it's looking like it may not be a BRICS currency. It might be canceled. That's according to some of the reports out of the BRICS nations themselves. But it wouldn't be the first time that there's been some confusion, some obfuscation, some denial on the international stage. And it's very possible that despite these reports, we may still be getting a new currency in one form or another, perhaps just the initial developments regarding that. And we're also going to talk about what will be happening at the BRICS summit to be held in just 1 month now. It's crazy how time flies, right? Now, you may be wondering, what does all of this have to do with gold and silver? BRICS currency, is it going to be gold? Is it going to be backed by gold? Possibly. That is possible. That is certainly what we've heard from some reports. But even if it doesn't, this is part of the broader trend of de-dollarization, this BRICS currency and some of the other actions that will be taking place at the BRICS summit next month. And gold and silver are always involved when we're talking about the value of the dollar, right? Because we typically look at the dollar price of both silver and gold, the spot price. And so they're sort of inverse to one another. As the dollar declines in value, the price, at least in dollar terms, of gold and silver tends to go up. So anything that weakens the dollar will likely have an impact on the precious metals. So we're going to talk about all these different angles here to this situation. I do want to say a big thank you to today's video sponsor, SD Bullion. Make sure you check them out if you're buying some gold or silver. Right now they have a great sale going on. Just launched this 72-hour sale. I might take advantage of this. They've got these 2023 1-ounce silver Britannias on sale for just $2.79 over spot any quantity. And I know, if you're just getting started stacking precious metals, those are great sales to take advantage of, those any quantity pricing sales, because you can make small purchases and still add to the stack without paying a crazy premium. Now, I've got someone in the chat saying India needs to be kicked out of BRICS and the SCO, that's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Let's get right into the news here, though, because India certainly does play a role in this potential denial of a BRICS currency. Now, if you recall, a couple weeks ago, we were looking at headlines like this from RT. I mean, this is a tweet from RT, said, BRICS is set to introduce a new currency backed by gold in contrast to the credit-backed US dollar, with the decision coming a month ahead of the bloc summit in Johannesburg. With the growing initiative, more and more countries are lining up to join the group. And this is the headline from RT on their broadcast, their New Money, New World. And they had several of these headlines, but now it is looking more and more like this may not actually come to pass, at least not at this meeting coming up. But, not necessarily. Let's take a look at that, though. Let's take a look at these developments. So this is a headline from Reuters. BRICS currency not on August summit agenda, South African official says. So this is according to Anil Suklal, that's South Africa's ambassador at large for Asia and BRICS, who was quoted as saying, there's never been talks of a BRICS currency. It's not on the agenda. And then also he went on to say, what we have said and we continue to deepen is trading in local currencies and settlement in local currencies. Now, to say there's been no talk of a BRICS currency, I mean, maybe this guy didn't see the notice from Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, who back in January told us that at the BRICS summit, here he is, Sergei Lavrov, that smiling fellow there, he told us that there is going to be a BRICS currency. So, it's kind of odd that the BRICS, or rather the South African ambassador there would tell us that there's no talk of it, because clearly there is. So, that's one clue that kind of leads me to believe that maybe this is some kind of obfuscation, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But also, this is from April 26 from Reuters. Brazil's Lula supports trading currency for BRICS countries. So again, clearly this is something that has at least been discussed. So, It's sort of a red flag to me when I hear this individual denying the existence of plans for a BRICS currency who tells us that there's not even been a discussion of it. It just seems kind of like an obfuscation to me. Let me know what you think in the chat. And also, thanks for tuning in today. I always enjoy these live streams where I can communicate with the audience in the chat. Please don't forget to smash that like button and, tell your friends, all that good stuff. It does help support the channel more than just about anything else you can do. I'm looking at the chat here. Yeah, World Token came out today and requires retinal scanning. Kind of another subject, but yeah, lots of dystopian, authoritarian stuff in the works. No doubt about that. Now, speaking of the obfuscation here, it kind of reminds me, if you recall, back in November of last year, the Wall Street Journal published a piece about Xi Jinping's upcoming visit to Saudi Arabia. So it was in early November. They published a piece that said in December of 2022, Xi would be visiting. And then this was the response. Now, it wasn't a flat out denial, but I mean, it sort of was like a de facto denial where the Chinese Foreign Ministry said they were unaware of reports about Xi's planned Saudi Arabia visit. And, they kind of basically just downplayed it, indicated it wasn't happening. The idea was coming out of the Chinese Foreign Ministry there that this, there was no knowledge of any planned trip. But then, what did we see occur in December? Well, they had the Gulf China conference there in Riyadh, and Xi visited Saudi Arabia. He was petitioning the Gulf countries in Saudi Arabia to sell their petroleum, price it in yuan. So despite that denial from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, that visit went ahead. And I just kind of have, echoes of that going on here when we hear from some of these individuals that there won't be a BRICS currency discussed at the conference. You can't take that report as evidence that it's not going to happen, is all I'm saying here. And that we may very well still see some form of development regarding a BRICS currency. Now, is a BRICS currency going to be launched? I think that is highly doubtful. Very unlikely that the BRICS nations are going to launch a currency at the August summit. But what we might see is the discussions and the planning for, a framework for a currency. And there will absolutely be a lot of discussion, as the South African ambassador said, of using local currencies, of shifting away from the dollar. So the de-dollarization plan is still in effect here. There's no doubt about it. But we're probably not going to see a currency launched. But I do think there may be some planning for it. Now, this was another story. This one is from the Times of India. BRICS plan to float a common currency and India's reaction to it. And the reaction was pretty critical here because basically we had the Indian External Affairs Minister in a press conference. He said that India has no plans for a BRICS currency. He declared a month before the summit that India might back out from creating the new currency. Instead, India is focused on strengthening its national currency, the rupee, and making rupee stronger will be the top priority of the Indian government. That's what the Indian External Affairs Minister had to say. And I'm assuming that this is the story that the individual in the chat there was referencing when they said India needs to be kicked out of BRICS. But, this is more or less still in line with the broader agenda. I see some folks in the chat saying hello there. Also, silver is being depleted. So hello to all of you. And yes, it certainly is. And, possibly if we do get a BRICS currency, let's say we get a commodity-linked currency. There's been a lot of speculation about gold being the basis of this potential BRICS currency, but it might not just be gold. It could be a basket of currencies. It could be could involve energy resources. Could involve silver. Certainly could involve platinum and platinum group metals. The BRICS have a pretty good chunk of the production of that. Palladium coming out of Russia and platinum coming out of South Africa. So this really affects all of the metals. I wanted to take a look at this headline briefly. This is one from a couple weeks ago from Bloomberg. So the headline is India and UAE to trade in local currencies and link their payment system. So again, despite the fact that the Indian External Affairs Minister tells us that, they're not working on one universal BRICS currency, there is still a strong trend of de-dollarization here. And the UAE is interesting that they specifically are de-dollarizing as well, because I want to talk a bit about the UAE and also the other Middle Eastern countries, because they are going to play a very important role in this BRICS conference. And yes, please do smash that like button. Jeff Thule Tiger Thomas, who happens to be one of my first channel members, I want to say a huge thank you to him and a few other folks who have signed up to be channel members. Remember, you can support the channel by clicking that join button there. I just appreciate it so much that some of you have signed up to be members, that you get enough value out of these videos to donate some of your hard-won fiat currency to the channel, about a silver dime's worth every month, and I really, really appreciate that. So just a huge thank you to all of you. Now, if you recall, the UAE, it was their natural gas that was purchased using yuan earlier this year. You had French energy giant Total Energy. I think they had about 65,000 tons. I'm maybe getting my units incorrect there, but it was a lot of UAE gas that they sold to China, and they settled the whole deal in yuan. So the UAE gas, UAE oil, all of this Middle Eastern energy resources, these may very soon be getting settled in yuan. And while that isn't, a BRICS currency development, it is a massive development towards de-dollarization. Yes, I appreciate all of you who leave great comments. If you check out the video I launched a couple days ago, it's a gold and silver stacking tip video, and most of the content in that video is actually directly from viewers such as yourself who left some really great info in the comments. So check that video out after this live stream. You can get some more wisdom crowdsourced from all of you. And while there may not be a BRICS currency being launched at this conference, of course, no guarantees about that, but one thing they're absolutely going to be looking at is BRICS expansion. So here's another headline from, what is this, from Reuters. More than 40 nations interested in joining BRICS, South Africa says. Hey, thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it, and you're very welcome. I just want to spread this information and get it out there, keep everybody informed, because, you won't really see a cohesive picture of this stuff painted in the mainstream media. At least that's my experience. They'll tell you bits and pieces of information, but they're not really putting the whole thing together for you. So that's what I'm attempting to do here, and give you kind of an overview of what's going to be happening, because now, again, we're a month away from this BRICS summit, and even if a new currency isn't launched there, a new BRICS currency, I suspect it could have some monumental implications for the global economy and for the dollar and for the precious metals and all of these things, and just our lives in general, because, we're all part of the global economy. And, just in terms of inflation here in the U.S., de-dollarization threatens to bring back inflation with a vengeance. And I think that is likely where we are headed. So more than 40 countries interested in joining the BRICS. Now, I believe it's about 20 who have formally applied. Actually, it's 22. According to this article, 22 countries who have formally applied to join the BRICS organization, and there's about 20 more who have expressed an informal interest. So maybe they haven't gone through the application process yet. Among the list here is Argentina, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Cuba, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Comoros, Gabon, and Kazakhstan. Now, a lot of people in the comments, I think this is kind of a typical Western take on this. They say, oh, those countries individually, they're just small beans. It's not going to make any difference to the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency. It's always going to be the world reserve currency. And look, I'm a patriotic American. I would like it. I mean, it certainly benefits me if the dollar remains the world reserve currency, but I also am just kind of empirical in my approach here to these observations. I try to be as objective as possible. I just don't really see that. And already, it's very important to note that the BRICS nations, their GDP has overtaken the G7 in global GDP. This is a story from Silk Road Briefing to that effect. And you can just see from this chart here, this is a chart of the BRICS nations' collective GDP versus the G7. And you can see we just reached an inflection point where the BRICS nations now are responsible for a greater portion of global GDP than the G7 in the West. And, they do also control massive amounts of natural resources. Like I said, South Africa produces something like 70% of the world's platinum. And when you factor Russia in there as well, the number is well over 80%. Russia and China, the world's number one and number two gold producers. So, they've got a lot of stuff and they've got a lot of people. So it's not to be dismissed. And if these other nations do end up joining the BRICS nations, then that discrepancy between the West and the BRICS nations' resources and GDP is going to become that much greater. But the big thing here with this expansion of BRICS. Let's say we don't get a BRICS currency. We are very likely going to see some major changes to the US dollar just because of the fact that the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Iran, all these major crude oil producers are going to be getting on board because, gold and silver certainly are important resources, but the world's most important resource, single most important commodity, is petroleum. I mean, the whole globe turns on it. If you like having light in your house, if you like driving your car, if you like eating food, oil touches all of that stuff in just about every area of the economy. And I mean, it's even critical for the production of things like silver, platinum, and gold. They're very energy intensive industries. And just for a reminder here, this is a list of the globe's top oil exporters. So in the number one position there, you've got Saudi Arabia. Number two, Canada. Okay, number three, Russia. Number four, United States. Number five, UAE. And then you've got some other OPEC nations there. You got Iraq, Kuwait, and Brazil also in the number 10 spot. They're a BRICS member. And this de-dollarization trend among all of these energy producing countries, this is probably more important even than the potential for a BRICS gold-backed currency or what have you, because of the petrodollar system. I mean, we've talked about this extensively in the past, but this is really going to be, I think, the thing that changes at this BRICS conference. For those of you who are not familiar with the petrodollar and what that term means, although I expect most of you probably are, I'll go over it real quick. This is from Investopedia. Petrodollars. Definition, history, and uses. So what is a petrodollar? Well, petrodollars are crude oil export revenues denominated in US dollars. The term gained currency in the mid 1970s when soaring oil prices generated large trade and current account surpluses for oil exporting countries. And that is primarily among the OPEC nations. And this is a deal that was worked out between President Nixon and Saudi Arabia way back in the 1970s. They were looking for ways to ensure that the OPEC nations sold all of their energy exports in dollars. And they continue to do this to today. I know there seems to be some misconceptions out there that these nations have already officially dumped the dollar. But as far as I know, they haven't. I mean, we have seen, for example, that transaction of UAE gas getting bought by China for yuan. So certainly that is a harbinger of the end of the petrodollar, I believe. Excuse me. But, as for now, that system remains intact. And when that system comes to an end, it is going to have major repercussions for the US dollar because this whole petrodollar system, whereby OPEC countries sell their oil denominated in US dollars and then they take those dollar profits and they roll them into US treasuries, they buy up US debt, they basically lend them back to the US. This system is critical for how the US dollar functions as the world reserve currency. It creates a huge amount of demand around the world, organic demand for dollars, because if you want to buy oil, you got to have dollars. And that props up the value of the dollar and it allows us to export a lot of inflation around the world. But as that system is threatening to come to an end with this BRICS meeting, they don't need to launch their own currency. And I want to take a look at this article from RT because it was those headlines from RT going around that were stirring up all of the interest in a BRICS currency. So this is the most recent update from them. BRICS leaders to discuss sustainable payment mechanism, and this is out of Moscow. Now, they say basically that establishing sustainable payment mechanisms for mutual trade is among the key issues to discuss at the summit next month. But they also acknowledge that the creation of a BRICS single currency would be a, quote, delicate process. Now, I think part of this is because the BRICS nations, they realize that they kind of get one shot at this. If they move prematurely and they launch a currency and it doesn't work, there's some kind of problems with it, it doesn't get widely adopted, then they will have really showed their hand, and it means any future currency launch will be much less likely to succeed. And so I think that they're kind of taking their time, they're biding their time, they're focusing on what they know works, which for right now just means getting the member states to ditch the dollar. But there has been all of this talk of a BRICS currency. And again, you can't take anything that any of these players say in this geopolitical environment at its face. I mean, they basically just say whatever they think will position themselves best for what is coming next. So the fact that, India and South Africa, some officials there have denied the development of a BRICS currency, I wouldn't take that to mean that one isn't being developed. It just means that there's something to gain by them denying it, right? And possibly it could be just, something we can take on its face. Maybe it is a little premature, but I do think that my take on it is that very likely we will see at least some kind of a nod towards a gold backed currency or a commodity backed currency, or at least a pan BRICS currency. But I do think that, expecting the launch of it this year is probably a bit premature based on what I'm seeing. But the de-dollarization trend is clearly in effect here. It is clearly moving forward, and the BRICS countries will continue to focus on de-dollarizing and trading in their local currencies. And, we know for a fact that some of these countries, for example, Russia and Iran's probably going to join BRICS next month, they're working on a gold backed stablecoin currency for settling international payments. So, they may just be working on this alternative BRICS currency in the background while they move forward with the more easily accessible de-dollarization ventures of shifting to local currencies and reducing the dollar's role in these cross-border payments. And when you look at this list of countries that are joining the BRICS organization, Saudi Arabia, UAE, basically the entire global south, also, if they're de-dollarizing, then that is going to have a significant impact even without their own currency. And I got a question here from Jeff. Is it possible that it could be backed by platinum in addition to gold and silver? Yeah, I think it's very likely that platinum would form some kind of a basis for a currency if they decide to use a basket of commodities as opposed to simply gold on its own. I definitely think platinum is a very strong candidate for that basket. Now, I don't think it would be, a purely platinum-based currency. Platinum is too rarefied a market. There's not that much platinum above ground, and it doesn't have quite the monetary history that gold and silver do. But again, it is a critical component of the global economy. I mean, you need it to make catalytic converters, and I know we're shifting towards electric vehicles and all that stuff, but there's still going to be a lot of demand for platinum. Internal combustion engines aren't going anywhere in the immediate future, despite the plans of the green agenda in the West. Although we're going to see more electric vehicles, I'm sure, and that's a good thing for silver. But yeah, we're the BRICS countries, they control again something like 80% of global platinum production. So if they really want to put the squeeze on the West, then they could either link that to their currency, reduce the exports. I mean, kind of like what China is doing with rare earths, right? They're using that sort of as a commodity weapon against the West. And I certainly think we could see more of that as well. Someone said you could see a gold to silver ratio of 1 to 1. Well, I wouldn't rule it out entirely. It seems unlikely just based on, how much of a wild divergence that would be from the current ratio of something like 80 to 1. But there is a reason that I primarily stack silver, and that is, I think, the gold to silver ratio will be going down significantly. Dreamer, someone says, well, yeah, maybe. I'm not saying that's going to happen, by the way. I just was reading a comment from the chat, but I wouldn't rule it out. The reason I say that is because, a couple of reasons. Let's talk about this real quick. I know it's a bit of a divergence from the BRICS thing, but while we're on the topic, I'll share my thoughts with you about why I think gold to silver could possibly go to 1 to 1, what the argument for that is. And that is that there's something like 6.7 billion ounces of gold available above ground, and there's something like 3 billion ounces of silver We also are continuing to grow the gold supply. Most of the gold that's ever been mined still exists above ground, whereas the silver supply is shrinking. They're not mining enough of it. And this probably has to do with the fact that the price is as low as it is. Whether that's from market forces or suppression, that's a topic for another conversation. But the silver price is very low. It hasn't incentivized miners to produce it. Last year, we had something like almost 250 million ounces, almost a quarter of a billion ounces of deficit in terms of silver consumption versus silver production from both mining and recycling. And if you're losing about a quarter billion ounces a year and you've got about 3 billion ounces above ground, well, I mean, you do the math, the silver doesn't last that long. And there's all these, new developments in solar technology. They're making more efficient panels, but ones that use new tech that requires more silver. And you've got this big push by governments around the world to go green and eliminate fossil fuels. And so, whether it's market forces or not, whether it's just, government edict that requires the production of all these solar panels, they're going to need a lot of silver for that. And the industrial uses for silver, they're continuing to grow, and people treat this stuff like trash. They just throw it into the dump. The phones, electronics, all that stuff, solar panels, they just go into the dump because at today's ridiculously low prices, it's not economical to recover that silver. And eventually, yeah, it could very well run out. I mean, I think we could find ourselves in a situation where there is a true silver shortage, and we could see the price spike up. Now, yeah, maybe that's a little pie in the sky. I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to get a 1-to-1 gold to silver ratio anytime soon, but I don't rule it out. I mean, crazier things have happened throughout history. And when you look at the numbers, I mean, I think there's a pretty good case for it. I definitely think that a return to something like a 20-to-1 ratio or 15-to-1 ratio is something I'll probably see at some point in my life. Maybe that won't be a sustained ratio, but I do think that when we see a big spike up, a bubble form in the precious metals markets, which eventually is going to happen as the US dollar continues to fail and the globe de-dollarizes, and the Federal Reserve just prints absolute, massive quantities of dollars to pay for all of the government spending, the things that happen when empires decline, that we could see a huge bubble forming, at least in dollar terms, in the precious metals. And yeah, silver tends to spike up faster than gold in situations like that. And you could see a massive compression of the gold to silver ratio. That's why, as much as I love gold, as much as I love it, it's a great precious metal, great store of value. If you need to have very compact store of value, it works great. But I am still the smart silver stacker, not the smart gold stacker. And I think that silver is really where the value is at. Now, of course, none of this is financial advice. Don't go out and just put your whole life savings into silver because you saw this channel. I'm not a financial advisor, just providing some information. But yeah, that's my take on that. And very likely, if we do see eventually a BRICS currency that's backed by commodities, maybe it won't be this year. I mean, it could be next year, it could be 2025, 2026, who knows? I do think that one is coming. And it's not the sort of thing you assemble overnight, so it may be seemingly slow as we watch this play out. But we're living through history, and when that happens, I think that absolutely you could see a big boost in the price of commodities, especially gold and silver, those dollar alternatives. And, here's one last thing I'll leave you with before we wrap this video up, this live stream up, is that even if the BRICS nations don't develop an alternative currency, like they don't make a gold-backed currency, they don't make a basket currency, they could just switch to transacting in gold, right? There's already an alternative global reserve currency out there, and it's real money. It's gold. I mean, gold, putting the world on a gold standard, you don't really need to create a currency. You can just transact in gold, and you can use it as a unit of account. If you've got friendly countries, you don't have to like send planes of gold back and forth. You can just do some kind of accounting to tell you who owns the gold, and that might in today's world look like a blockchain or a stable coin or something like that, but maybe not. I mean, maybe we've been on a gold standard before. This is not new stuff. The world operated on a bimetallic standard and then a gold standard for hundreds of years. And this, again, this is not anything groundbreaking, right? I mean, there are people alive today who were alive when the US was on a gold standard, right? 1971. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that the US dollar itself was backed by gold. And if it still was, I can almost guarantee you that there wouldn't be any talk of creating alternative currencies. But, that's not how things worked out. We abused the dollar status as the world reserve currency. We printed too many of them. We got involved in things like the Vietnam War, and we created a welfare state here in the US, and we spent way more money than we had, and folks started to get a little worried and try to take their gold back, and we had to end the gold standard. We ended gold convertibility. And, part of the problem with reinstating that here in the US, one of the stated reasons why they don't do it, is because, places like Russia and China are actually the top gold producers in the world. And so I think there's some concern in the US leadership that if we were to return to something like a gold standard, it would give them too much power over the global economy. But that is probably coming anyway. So anyway, on that note, I will leave all of you. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. We'll do more of these live streams soon. I look forward to talking to all of you. And certainly, it is going to be very interesting over the next month or so to watch this play out, because maybe the BRICS nations won't announce a new reserve currency at the August meeting, which is in exactly 1 month. But something's going to happen there that is going to shake up the global economy. I am convinced of that. And don't rule out the alternate currency just because you hear from a few folks that they're not doing it, because you can't take anything for granted these days, and only time is going to tell. So thanks everybody for watching. I will catch you next time. Stay safe and happy stacking. Smart Silver Stacker out.